All right, so let's make a formal introduction for our listeners. Good morning to you, Jim Ottaway. My name is Claudio. I'm calling from Washington, D.C., from the studios in Fairfax City. We're very humble and grateful that Jim accepted our invitation to our show. Jim, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much, Claudio. How are you going?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. So let's start. We always start with this question. You know, we are living in crazy time with the pandemic from the last 2 years. You know, if you're a touring musician, you cannot tour. You're working from home, perhaps. You know, have been difficult for not just a musician, but for everybody in the world. How COVID affected you, your family, how you holding up, man?
Oh, look, very, very well, actually, Claudio. I mean, we've been very lucky here in Australia in relation to COVID. Look, it has, you know, it's been bad. We've had people lose their lives, people lose their jobs and all that type of thing, sadly, but not as bad as what's been happening all around the world, particularly in the States and, you know, in China and in the UK and such. We've been very lucky in that regard. From my perspective, I am very much a homebody. I very much like to stick around the home and do things here around the local area. So in a way, it hasn't affected me too much. It's probably given me an opportunity to catch up on things that, you know, that haven't been done for years around the house, and, you know, to focus more on the music and the composing, and just, I suppose, a time to take a step back, because our lives can be very full on, very fast paced. You know what the world's like these days. Everything happens like that. And I think it's allowed me and the people I've spoken to who I know here to take a step back. My family have been okay. I've got, you know, 3 sisters and their families, and unfortunately, in more recent times, I think 3 of them have caught COVID, but mild cases, thank goodness. And in my field of friends, too, very, very few have got COVID. So, you know, from my perspective, it didn't affect my life too much at this point in time. Mind you, it's still out there, isn't it? I mean, we're getting another, was it a 3rd wave or something they call it, coming through Australia at the moment. And of course, it's here in winter, it's the flu season as well. But look, it's given me an opportunity to catch up on things and to try and focus a little bit more on the music part of it. Claudio, how about yourself? Have you been affected?
Yeah, I mean, it's very sad here in the United States. Over 1 million people died, you know, and how many millions in the world? We have a crazy president before that didn't believe that stuff existed, and, you know, I don't want to go there into politics, but it's terrible. I mean, a lot of people that I know have died, and I feel very bad. In a way, for me, you know, I was going in my life. I'm a computer scientist. I will go to my life, you know, teaching and then working and doing other stuff. I was going very, very fast. And the COVID allowed me to slow down and do a reevaluation of my life, and then determine what was important, what was not important. I was doing a lot of stuff that I wasn't happy with. I was doing it, right? And I slowed down. I look at my life. I say, you know, music is very important to me. You know, it's always been, and I want to put this radio together. And at the beginning, it was very hard. I want to begin interviewing people. I want to see more shows and whatever. And it works out well for me. And also, I did an evaluation of my life in the sense that I needed to slow down and see that, hey, I may not live. I may not make it, you know. My wife may not make it. My son may not make it. So I needed to be very careful, you know, working from home, don't going out that much, just going to the grocery to buy the stuff. And I was slowing down a lot. And, you know, I began examining the simple things in life, you know, like they say in the United States, smell the roses.
Yeah.
You know, it's literally what I did. You know, I have like a good garden in the 2nd floor of the house, and I you know, thanks God that we are alive, and I'm good. I'm very fortunate that a lot of people didn't make it. You know, so it was
terrible situation all around the world, really, and I suppose some people have, as you've said, just taken the chance to take a step back, reassess things, and you know, clean the windows and the curtains.
Yeah, and there's still people that don't believe in the vaccine, or they have not received the vaccination. I don't understand. It's anyways. Novak Djokovic is one of them that went to Australia. They started an open, and he wanted to say, "Hey, I'm here, and #1 in the world." And the Australian Federation, they determined, no. If you are not vaccinated, I don't care who you are, you cannot enter the country. So I'm glad.
Yeah, look, Australia the government has been very firm on this from the word go, and I think that's helped to keep the numbers of deaths and people getting COVID down. And that's people. It's been hard on some people, more so on some than others, but that's why we've come out of it in a pretty good way so far.
Absolutely. Were you born in a musical family, or no? How old were you when you perhaps began taking piano lesson or guitar lesson before keyboards? Was music?
Claudia, I was born in north of where I live now, up the Queensland coast, in a place called Rockhampton. My family, mum and dad, had a store there, like a corner convenience store. And we moved from Rockhampton to Brisbane in the mid-60s, about 65, I think it was. And the family, my mum played piano a little bit. My 3 sisters learnt piano and played piano well. And I learnt when I was, probably in primary school. I did lessons for a number of years. I didn't sit for exams. I didn't want to have to go through that process of being assessed, and it was nice just being able to learn and understand music, and to be able to read music. I'm not the greatest sight reader. I'm not a very good sight reader, to be perfectly honest, but with the line of music that I do, that's not really important. My dad, who passed away about 21 years ago, he used to play harmonica, and in his later years. So there's always been music in our family, and particularly also listening to music. I remember my sister Lucy, my eldest sister, she had all the the Beatles and the Beach Boys and the Dave Clark Five, all their 45s, and I'd be sitting up against her bedroom, listening to her play her records. And that's
right.
My love of 45s and LPs came about because of that. And I think even going further back in the family, my dad's sister, Ruby, who died very young, she was only 18, and this was back in probably the 1930s or 40s. She used to be a very good pianist as well. So, and in my family now, one of my nephews, Alex, he's principal bass clarinet with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
So he's a very talented young man. Yeah.
Good for you. When you were the equivalent of high school, what kind of music were you listening at the time?
Well, my high school years were from 74 through to 78. And so that was, what I consider my era of music is the late 60s or the mid 60s through to, the early 80s. That's what I particularly like. But, what I was buying was probably pretty easy listening pop music at the time. But, I also, that was when in 75, I think it was 75, was where I first got my taste of electronic music, because my sister Bernie used to do ballet, and her teacher had them dancing to tracks from Heaven and Hell by Vangelis. So that was one of the first things. And of course, one of my mates also came home to my place, probably wanting to meet up with one of my sisters, but he had just come from the local shopping centre and had bought Phaedra by Tangerine Dream.
Oh my God, what an album.
We played it over, this is about 75, we played it over and over and over until my dad about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night said, turn that music off, But music-wise, I mean, I've always, I'm just trying to think back, but I like a lot of the Australian music particularly, trying to think now of who I like, but my collection's quite large. It wouldn't be as large as your collection, Claudia, but I do have a lot of 45s and LPs and CDs now. I'm not really a digital person. I don't particularly like files. I want to feel CD or a record, and I want to be able to
I know exactly. I'm the same way, man. I'm old school. You know, I need to open the vinyl, see the picture, you know, put on the turntable, you know, and listen both sides and look at the lyrics. And of course, it's very different than downloading music and you hear 10 seconds. I don't like this stuff. Go next. I don't like go next. No, that's not the way to enjoy music.
It's too easy, and also from the perspective of the time and effort you put into to actually put an album together. I mean, I still get CDs produced. Some artists don't these days. But I mean, you put a bit of effort into, I mean, part of the process is trying to work out a track order, which, you know, you as the artist want the album to feel like, you know, and with streaming and such, click, 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 as you were saying, and it kind of destroys the flow of the music. I mean, I know a lot of artists these days, you know, and I know it's the money way of doing it, to release singles first and then the album. But it's, I mean, I'm not a singles person. I produce the albums, and, you know, and that's the way that I do it. But yeah.
Are your, I noticed that in Bandcamp, I was able to find the album plus the stuff you sent me. I'm very grateful. Do you actually, people buy the CDs, or do you have anything on vinyl as well or not?
No vinyl, no vinyl.
But CDs, physical thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I know a few of my music friends from the States. Keith Ritchie, for example, he's just organised the release of some of his music on LP, which is great. No, I think I'm sticking at this stage to the CDs, and look, I wouldn't say the sales are tremendous, Claudio, but it's more people downloading at this stage. But as I said, I'm old school. I would really still like to see that CD. To me, it almost doesn't feel like an album unless you have something there, you know, a CD that you can hold on to and feel, and, you know.
Exactly. No, I know. I'm the same way. And I'm the same way. So when you decided so you finished high school, you said, well, music is, you know, I like Tangerine Dream, I like Edgar Froese, I like Vangelis at the time. Did you have any pressure from your parents to, hey, forget about music, you're not going to make any money, go to college, get a good job, forget about the electronic stuff that you will never make any money, or was it?
Well, to be perfectly honest, Claudia, I really wasn't a musician when I was at school or leaving school. When I left school, I got straight at a job with the Queensland government here in the state of Queensland, and I worked for them for 33 years. And at that stage, music was kind of me playing music left me for quite a few years. I didn't have access to a piano at home, and I hadn't got back into music at that stage. There was no pressure from my parents at all. I got back into music around about 2003, so it was quite a big gap. And I was still at work. I was still working full time, and at that stage, I had stopped all my studies, so I was able to focus on some of the music. And you know, it just came to me. I went through a little bit of a difficult time in 2001, and I needed something to get me out of that slump, and music was what I chose, and bought it. You know, I wasn't say cheap, but a Casio keyboard, and within about 3 months, I said, this is for me. And I bought my Korg synthesizers and a good computer and monitors and everything and software, and really started from scratch at that particular time. You know, so I didn't have that period from leaving school trying to develop my skills. There was this big gap, but in a way that was good, because I've been listening to so much music in that time, whether it be pop music, popular music, or whether it be, you know, I had got into Tangerine Dream very heavily at that stage, and Vangelis, and some of the more local people like Tony O'Connor and such, who did the new age type music. And so I had a little bit good background of things, but again, I didn't spread myself wide with electronic artist, I mean, I'm very limited in what I actually listen to and what I have in my collection. And that may be a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But it's certainly, it's helped me to focus, I suppose, on what I like. Because with my music, Claudia, as you'd probably be able to tell from that most recent album, there's a lot of different styles on one album. And, you know, that has its good points and maybe it has its bad points. But I like a little bit of variety in the music that I listen to. And so that kind of comes through in what I put together. And I'm a bit of a sucker for a lovely melody, like, you know, Vangelis with his melody. So I always try and bring the melody into whatever electronic music that I do, other than the very spacey type stuff that I've done, and even dark ambient music. You know, not a lot of melody there, but there's a lot of atmosphere.
Well, you have done very well. I listened to the stuff you sent me, the stuff on Bandcamp, the stuff on Spotify, and man, you're a very talented guy, man. You're very humble, but very talented. Thanks,
Claudia. Yeah, well, like, as I said, it's all very much self-taught and self-learned, and I enjoy it. It's a very serious hobby. You know, it's not a great money spinner, but it's you know, unfortunately, I'm in a position where I can focus on it and the love of the music.
Are you still working full time, or you're kind of retired? No,
Claudia. Look, I stopped about this year will be 10 years ago. I stopped in December. What are we now? 2012. The 2012, I stopped, and for a few reasons, my health wasn't the greatest, and I think the opportunity was there for me to move on, and it gave me the chance to do the things that I really needed to do and wanted to do. And it was strangely enough, I mentioned that I started, you know, getting serious in the music in 2003, but it wasn't until 2015 that I actually went international. I recorded, you know, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16 albums, and kind of released them locally here to friends, family, and church group people and things like that. Then when I started to get a little bit more serious, this is what I want to focus on, I then started to send music overseas and get it up onto Bandcamp. And, you know, probably, unfortunately, I didn't take the right approach. I kind of sent a whole bundle of, you know, albums to overseas. So they all got released at the one time. And since that time, I think 15 or 16 albums I've released since what I consider I've gone international with the music.
But you have received many awards. Feel free to elaborate on those. I mean, you're very humble. You've received many. You're like a award-winning musician, man, and composer. You know.
Yeah, look, I've been lucky enough to be nominated for a few awards and to actually to win awards, and that's, you know, that's really wonderful. And I've had the opportunity twice to get over to New Orleans for the Zone Music Recorder Awards, which is like it's kind of like a step from the Grammys, where it kind of focuses on that new age category, but it then breaks it down into, you know, solo piano and acoustic instruments and electronic and ambient and chill and all those type of things. So I've had a few, I think three awards for 3 of my albums, which is, you know, really lovely. And I got to meet some great people, and one of the ones I got to meet was Fiona George-Hawkins, who's a wonderful pianist here in Australia, and she's won quite a few international awards. And you know, she lives here in Australia, and I get to meet her in New Orleans. It's crazy, you know.
Isn't that? Of course, that's crazy, man. And how's it been? I mean, how are you doing in Bandcamp? You doing okay? I mean, it's a little bit of money because of Spotify. In Spotify, you need to have like a million hits to get a $5 check or something, right? So.
Yeah, look, I don't keep my eye on that too much, to be perfectly honest, Claudia, because I do it because I love what I'm doing. Yeah, look, there's certainly a little bit of money coming in, but, you know, probably one of the best sources is if you can get your music on something like Sirius XM. You know, that's where you actually get some money. You know, and I was lucky enough to have one track in rotation there the last year or so, and that's, you know, where some good money is. Otherwise, it's great to see that, you know, they're streaming, but as you know, with streaming sites, you know, one stream is what 0.0004%. You know, so I think I saw who was it? One of the really big artists were, got up. Peter Frampton, I think it was, wasn't it? Who got up and said, "Well, I've had about 60 million hits on this, and I've got $5,000."
Yeah. You need to have like a lot of stuff. But why did you fall in love with electronic music? Why? You mentioned Tangerine, you mentioned Edgar, Froese, you mentioned Vangelis, right? Those are big names. Why that as opposed to, I don't know, pop or jazz or rock, other genres?
Well, look, I think the love of music is really a lot. My sister, one of my sisters kind of laughed. She said, "Look, if someone ever comes to rob your house, they won't take your CD collection because it's too strange." Because there's a big variety of music. I have a little bit of classical, a lot of popular music and blues music, and some electronic music. But that early stage of hearing Tangerine Dream, there was quite a gap. There was probably a gap of about 5 years before I actually, could afford to buy my own Tangerine Dream album. And look, I think it was around about that early 80s mark, the White Eagle and Exit and Thief, the soundtrack to Thief, where I really started to go out and buy every week. I'd buy a new one. And so even though I had liked them before, I just didn't have the financial resource to go out and buy the back catalogue. Yeah. And I think I heard a fair bit of the Thief soundtrack. We had a sports program here called Sports Scene, and they would always have this particular track, and I managed to figure out that it was one of the tracks from the Thief score, and went out and bought that. And also that was around about the time that Vangelis had released Chariots of Fire as well, and that's such a beautiful soundtrack. That particular album. So my love of electronic music was a little bit earlier, but to actually start adding it to my collection was probably 79, 80, around about that period of time. Yeah.
And then when did you begin writing your own music? When the early beginning? It was 2003?
About 2003. Yeah, about 2003. It started from when I first got the Casio. I just started recording, and actually, strangely, just recently, I gave the Casio to one of my sisters, and recorded within the little sequencer within it was some really early tracks of mine, and I thought, oh, I didn't realise that they were there, but you wouldn't want to hear it, but it was the start, of composing. And what I do now, Claudio, I'm just looking over the side here, but I've got a pile of what I write out, sheet music this much that I haven't ever recorded. So there's two approaches that I take. I either write it out, and I suppose if I ever have writer's block, I'll be able to go to that pile and hopefully understand what I've written there. But in more recent years, it's more going straight to the computer and recording something. At least it's down there the way that I actually want it to be. Whereas when it's written down, when I go back to it, it might be slightly different in my mind, but that's okay. But if I ever get writer's block, I've got plenty of music there to work on. Yeah.
And as you are recording a new album, you always record everything that you are making every day, and then you put it aside for a while to see if it doesn't work in the theme or a particular album, and you always have ideas in the background, right, for a new album, or perhaps, I don't know, if an album has 12 tracks, you may write 30 and then pick the 12 that will flow together in that album, right, and to keep the other in the background. That's the way it works, right?
Yeah, look, I know a lot of artists, particular pop artists, they compose tracks for an album. They release one album and then they're composing for the next. I just compose all the time and record all the time. And that's why you might see, you may not have seen the liner notes, Claudio, on some of my albums, but I actually state, that these tracks were composed and recorded between March 2008 and 2022. And I've got, probably 30 or 40 hours of music that I've recorded that I haven't released. Yeah. So when I release an album, and I tend to alternate. I tend to do a more ambient album one year and an electronic album the next, or maybe a mix of electronic and ambient together. Like the second last album, Threshold of the Universe, was supposed to be a full ambient album, but I ended up adding some, sequences to it as well. So I don't compose specifically for an album, but I then go back and listen to everything. I have them kind of filed in groups so that I know what style of music it is. So it might be ambient or electronic or melodic electronic or weird. And then I just think, okay, what album am I going to compose? What's the theme of it? And then I go back and listen. And oftentimes, for example, a track I might have recorded in 2008, I revisit it. It might be that's very rough, or I want to add strings to it, or new bass, or a new sequence, or some strange ambiences or sounds to it, and then it kind of comes together. And I might start off with 4 hours of music, then I cut it down to 2 hours of music, then an hour and a half of music, and then I try and get it to just over 60 to 65, 70. So wow. I know that I think, okay, well, I can use those on my next album if I want to, that's the approach that I've been taking to it for many years. I'm very lucky that I've got a bit of a back catalogue. And also, Claudio, one of my main keyboards here is called Karma, and it has a 16-track sequencer. And everything I do a lot of improvised music. A lot of my ambient albums are just sitting down, pressing record and playing. And that's it. And sometimes if I release an album, I might add a little bit to the top, a little bit of overdubbing, but not a huge amount. But I went back, I've got, 2,000 tracks recorded like that. And during COVID, I took the chance to actually go back and I generally mark next to it if I think there's a bit of an opportunity to work on a track. And I went back and listened to everything. And I actually got probably about 30 or 40 tracks from that, and then recorded them. And they're in my database now to actually use later on. So, having the sequencer on the keyboard was great. But now I tend to record directly, more so to the computer. Yeah.
Good for you. How difficult? Your first album was First Light, right?
Yeah.
How difficult was to put for the most part, the first thing you do would be harder because, it takes a lot of effort, money to put it together, putting yourself out there. You don't know you like it because that's what you do it because you like it, you want to release it. You don't know what the public will think or your friends will think about that. How difficult was time consuming, emotional, putting the first album together? Was difficult to put it together?
Well, Claudio, I was still working at the time, and again, it was really it was something to try and get me out of a bit of a hole, really, and so it wasn't really difficult. I had recorded a number of songs, and I used to release little demo CDs. Actually, I think the first thing I actually recorded, I used to record to the sequences, on my chord, and I produced. I borrowed a mini disc player from a friend of mine, and put 8 tracks into a mini disc. So I've got a mini disc of an early version of my First Light album. Then it went on to cassette, and then eventually, when I had all the gear here, it went on to a new version of it. Went on to CD or CDR, because I didn't get the CDs manufactured then. It's just the CDR version of it. And look, it wasn't a difficult process. It was just an enjoyable process, and it's an album that is really not available anywhere other than, I don't even have it now available on my website, and I'll explain the reason for that. But a lot of people around here, the local area, the church groups and friends and family, one of their favourites, because it's very, perfect for relaxation and meditation, things like that. And it's where I go to the chiropractor, he's been playing it for the last 7 years non-stop in 2 rooms. I said, if I had $1 for every time he played it, I'd be a millionaire.
That's right. That's what I was thinking. Where's your check?
He's a friend of mine. So, and every time I go in there, I said, oh, this album isn't too bad. Oh, gee, that timing's not the best, because it was all improvised. You know, I didn't have metronomes going, or I didn't use MIDI. I just played. So one of my thoughts, Claudio, is that should I go back and revisit the album and, you know, re-record bits of it? And look, next year, no, 2024 will be the 20th anniversary. I thought, well, maybe I should try to do that, to release it. I'm a little bit concerned about releasing some of the stuff that is early, because, you know, it is part of my progression in music. But also I did have some bad experiences of someone buying it. One of them, for example, and next minute it was up on a website for free somewhere, and I didn't, you know, and they even said, well, we bought this and I can now put it up for free. Well, no. So I straight away I took them off from being available for sale. I thought, well, that's not really what I want. I want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to listen to it, you know.
Of course, yeah. No, and then so you put, you know, when you had the first copy, you know, whether it was on a disc or a CDR, were you able to send it to some radio station, friends, family, businesses? Did they play the stuff, or was you did it because you wanted to do it? It was for you, you know, as a, you know, relief for what you were going through in your life, whatever, and you put your stuff out there, and then you know, it's a beautiful thing, you know. The first thing, like I remember the first my interview, you know, the best guitarist, or one of the best guitarists in the world, Steve Hackett. I was nervous. I thought about, and this guy's in English will be understand my accent or the question that I want to ask him. Of course, I researched his life, and I knew he was a member of Genesis because I've been following that. But I said, what the heck, I need to do it. And then the first thing you do was harder, and then the second was easier, and the third is easier, and so on, right? I suppose that, you know, that's the way life is. You know, you need to take risk, and
yeah, of course,
go, you know, get it over with. You know, so
that's right. Yes, the first Light album, Claudio, really hasn't been released internationally at all. It's just a local release, and I hope to at some stage to get it out. There's been a lot of albums. I mean, some of the tracks would need a little bit of work now to get them up to, you know, a better standard. But I'm very proud of what I've done, and it's all part of the progression of the music. You know, I mean, I wasn't you know, I didn't go to university. I didn't study sound engineering or anything like this. I've just done this all myself, but with a bit of help from friends. I mean, people like Mike Hunter he performs under the name of Ambient. I don't know if you know Mike. He has a radio show called Music with Space. He just gave me a few little tips about, you know, of mastering a CD and stuff like that. So I you know, it's good to have friends, you know, on Facebook and through email that can help you out with some of these things. So I started from scratch, and I got to a point where, you know, I'm not the world's best mixer or masterer, but I think I put out something which is, you know, people will listen to, hopefully.
Are you right now? You doing self-releasing, or you going to a record label? Or
I have always done everything myself, Claudio. I do from the composing, recording, mixing, mastering, you know, dealing with the manufacturers of the CDs. I do all my own sending out of the CD, you know, putting them into envelopes and I do individual letters to everybody. You know, it's not a Romeo letter that goes to people. It's a personal letter, and it's and personal emails to people. It's the approach that I've taken. Maybe I might get a wider field through and there's some lovely people. I've met some lovely people here in New Orleans who are great promoters of the style of music that we do. But I kind of felt that I wanted to. It's a bit like I remember saying this in another interview, that when I recorded electronic music originally, a lot of the sequences I just did it by hand. You know, I didn't do MIDI or anything like that, or press a button and it all did it. And then the interviewer was kind of a little bit surprised, and kind of said, "Oh, he says," but I did, and then I realised, well, to be up with the big boys, you've got to do it a little bit.